Hey, what's happening? Happy Friday. Good morning to everybody. It's Daryl here. It's bright and freaking early. It's 4 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, this video. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time. I want to talk about something that I think is one of the biggest factors in continued addiction and relapse, especially and I'm going to talk about especially with men, because being a man, I dealt with this and I saw this in a lot of the people that I was around that were using, in men that I was around. I believe it happens with women too. I'm not sure. I need to talk about this. It's the combination of perverse, deviant sex drive combined with using stimulants like cocaine and methamphetamine. You know, right before I started, this is one of the biggest factors that kept me addicted. I've talked about this in other videos. It's a tough thing to talk about. Right before I started this video, I did some Googling. And people just do not talk about this because it's bizarre. I don't know if there's an answer to it. It's bizarre. It's embarrassing. We're not talking regular sex drive here. And I'm going to give you guys an example. A couple examples. Serious, true to life, 100%, swear to God examples. And the reason I talk about this is one of the biggest factors that kept me addicted. My addiction to stimulants, cocaine and crack especially, combined with just and intertwined with a deviant sex drive. With me, it was pornography. I would go pick up cocaine, and then I would right in the same trip, I would pick up magazines and videos. So you got to remember, I've been clean since 2006, since October 23rd of 2006. And, you know, and the internet wasn't quite, I didn't have a cell phone. I think I might have had a computer, but of course I didn't pay the bill. So with me, this was back in 2006. It was magazines and videos. And I'll tell you briefly what I did. I would pick up the cocaine, the crack, and then I would stop at one of those convenience stores, and they have the 3-packs, and sometimes they would have a DVD in there. And I remember going home, and I remember running out of my car, running up the steps to my little private room. I'd lock myself in, and you know, it's my own apartment, but I'd barricade myself in my apartment, barricade myself in a room in my apartment, and I would just flip through the magazine. This is where it got weird. And then, you know, I would take a hit, flip through the magazine, take a hit. There was no release. There was no pleasure with this. This was every single time. This was my behavior. And this is embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you guys this because for the benefit of people that are involved, that are stuck in this cycle, I would rip pages out and I'd pin them up on the wall. I remember almost having an overdose and being admitted to a detox the next morning. And these papers, these pages of pornographic magazines were pinned up all over this room I barricaded myself in. Hundreds of magazines all over the floor, covering the entire floor, along with the drug paraphernalia. And I had to be admitted to the hospital for detox. And my family, my mother, ended up going to my house and then finding this stuff. And, you know, to this day, we haven't talked about it all that much. And I'm going to tell you guys some of the just bizarre behavior of men I was around. I believe this is one of the things that kept me in addiction. And it worked the other way too. I'd be walking in the mall, or I'd be walking in the grocery store before I even started using that morning, which had to be pretty freaking early, you know, and I would see a girl. Oh, this is more when I was in recovery. Now that I think about it, you know, I'd be in the because I was in the grocery store or the mall a lot when I was using. Now that I think about it, it was in recovery, and I'd see a girl. I remember one specific girl in a mall that had this. It looked like a stripper outfit on, and I saw her. And the first instinct was my dealer's phone number. It's unless you've gone through this, it's bizarre. The intertwine, how they're intertwined like this. And then the reason it was so hard, I thought it was impossible for me to get clean. is, I'm how can I ever get clean if every time I see a picture of a girl, every time I see a girl on the sidewalk, I get this insane desire to use. How can I ever have a relationship? How can I ever get married? How can I have a girlfriend? How, it's impossible. And it was so depressing. And what was the point? I'll tell you guys how I eventually did it. I had to quit both. I had to stay away from, I stayed out of relationships. So I completely away from pornography for 7 years. And eventually the two became unconnected. I'm going to tell you guys about one specific incident. I'm going to tell you guys about a couple instances, and these were just random. This happened to a lot of guys that I hung out with. Before I started this video, I Googled sex drive and cocaine. What part of the brain does cocaine affect? What part of the brain does sex drive affect? And I got random answers. And people just don't talk about this, and it drives me crazy. When I go to NA groups and AA groups, they don't talk about this. When I was in the hospital, when I was in rehab, they don't talk about this. I don't hear anybody talking about this because the behavior is so bizarre. I don't think anybody wants to admit to it, and that's why I'm here. I told you guys about me, and that's sincere. That was my thing. It wasn't as bizarre as some of the stuff I came across. I remember going with the girl that I was using with. I won't call her my girlfriend. The girl I was using with, and we met another couple in the town next door, and we were sitting there using, and the other girlfriend started kidding around about how her boyfriend liked to put bananas in the freezer and freeze them so they were hard and then use them. I'm just going to have to stop there. And this was his girlfriend saying how he liked to do this. And you could tell she was uncomfortable and she didn't know what to, he would do this. But everybody just kind of laughed uncomfortably, kept using, and serious story. And this one's even weirder. There was this guy I went to high school with. He was a couple years younger than me. And we came across, we were using the same circle in this small town. And I knew that he got a huge check. He was in a ATV accident right out of high school. And he had brain injury. And this, a lot of people say maybe this had something to do with it. But I've seen this in other people without brain injuries. And we started hanging out together. And I looking back, I'm embarrassed and ashamed of what I did. I used this guy. I didn't particularly like him because I knew he was different. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. And so I would specifically let him come over and hang out with him when I knew he was going to get the check for the month. And he'd get a whole prescription of oxys and another prescription. He'd get these massive prescriptions and amounts of money on one day of the month. And that's the day I would buddy up to him. I'm disgusted, it's embarrassing, but that's what I did. And it gets worse. He lost his apartment and he was looking for a place to stay. So I let him stay with me. I told him, I said, this isn't long term. This could be for a couple of days, but he started making himself comfortable. One night we're smoking, and he goes upstairs, he comes back down, and he's wearing women's clothes. Seriously, he's wearing, but not in a traditional, like, transgender way. He looks like a guy, except he's got eyeliner on, and it looks kind of psychotic, really, to me. I don't think he was transgender. I don't think he was a transvestite. It was just his thing with cocaine. And he had falsies in, but he still had like a guy's t-shirt on, and he had women's pants on. Like, I don't know what they're called. They come up to the knee. It looked weird. It looked bizarre. And there was a couple nights where he would do this, and there was no interaction between me and him, so I just let it continue. We would sit there, and he'd do his thing, and I'd look through my magazines, and he'd dress like that, and I would use his drugs, and that was that. One night, we went to go get more drugs. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was dressed like this, with his eyeshadow on, just looking bizarre. Not looking like a woman at all, just looking like a man that had various women's apparel and a little bit of makeup on. It just bizarre. Like I said, I don't believe he was transgender or transvestite. This was just his thing when he used. We're sitting in a car near a junkyard in the main part of town at 2 or 3 in the morning in Dead End Street. And I'm panicking. 'Cause I know it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a policeman is going to come on patrol down this street. There were several junkyards in the area. And I'm sitting here with this guy, and I'm just picturing when the cop puts his flashlight in the car. And we're both all jittery from the drug, and he's half dressed like a woman. You know, good God, what's going to happen here? What's this cop going to think? And I'm just panicking. So after this, we go home. Next day, I made up this excuse to get him out of the house. I dropped him off in the state forest a couple miles away. I said, my whole family's coming over. I got to get you out of the house for a little while. So I'll just drop you off. There's a woods here. It was during the summer. You could hang out in the woods. I'll come pick you up in a couple hours. My family's coming over. We got to clean up the house. And I just ditched him, and I never went back. It was on the 4th of July. And he was partially dressed as a woman. By 8 o'clock that night, and we got to remember, I wasn't making good decisions at the time, but I had just had enough after that night sitting at the junkyard. He came back about 8 p.m. and he broke a window. After he somehow made it all across town, after I ditched him like an abandoned dog across the street, across town, and he broke the window and to try to get back into the house because I locked him out. I put all his stuff outside and just locked him out. And it got physical then. I chased him down the street and police came. Luckily for me, he had a warrant and they just took him away. They didn't ask me too many questions. They'd been looking for him. And they didn't really care too much about what my position or my role in it or anything to do with it. They just took him away. They pretty much almost thanked me and took him away. I got clean shortly after that. This was in the summer of July 4th, and then by October 23rd, I was clean and sober. And he tried to even after all this, he tried to contact me, and I told him, I said, dude, stay away. I'm clean and sober. And this is one of those instances. This is something I found when I first got clean and sober. Whenever I told, people that came by that wanted to use, hey, I'm clean and sober. So they'd say, oh yeah, me too. And it didn't take long for me to realize they lie. They're all lying. They just wanted to get in the house and use. And I hadn't heard from them again. But this is this bizarre connection between where sex and cocaine get intertwined, especially in men. And this isn't the only instance. I have seen this over and over. There's been instances where guys I knew since childhood, with girlfriends, everything all of a sudden became bisexual, in my presence, in other men's presence. And I don't really think this is about sexual preference, like about being transgender or bisexual or any of that. It's some effect on the brain where it's this deviant behavior, this where the two get combined. And this is one of the things that keep people, especially men, I'd say especially between men between 20 and 40, because that's when my sex drive was the highest. Yeah, it's still there now, but back when I was in my 20s and 30s, it was considerably higher. And I think, it's almost impossible for somebody using stimulants, a man like this, to get clean, because it's just, you don't see a future. How can you have a future? How can you have any relationship? How, because sex is constantly on your mind as a man. Therefore, the drugs are constantly on your mind. And I don't see people talking about this to this day. Methamphetamine does the same thing, so I hear. I didn't have as much methamphetamine wasn't around as much when I was using. All right, I see I'm running long on time. I'm gonna have to do more of this in the next video. I need to talk about this. This is one of the things that kept me addicted for so long. It's kept guys I know addicted for so long. And if I ever do relapse, I have to be very careful that these two things they always stay apart. If I ever relapse, I think it would be because of a combination where I got comfortable in some intimate relationship with a woman and then drugs were introduced. That would be my weakest point. This is why I talk about this. And I'll talk more about it in the next video. You guys have a good Friday.